What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Screams and Sorrows. I'm back here with my best bud, Alex. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. It's good to see your delicious, delightful face.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's been a while. I know that we checked out Blink 182, what almost seems like forever ago at this point. But we're back again.
Was it November?
That was November. Yeah, it had to be November. And that was a lot of fun, man. That was probably one of my favorite episodes that we did. So I'm excited to kind of jump into this. And we're going to be checking out essentially the pop punk legends of Canada, Sum 41. And, you know, it's kind of bittersweet because I've been a Sum 41 fan. Let me take you back, right? Because I grew up in a little town outside of Toronto called Ajax. And in Ajax, that is where actually Sum 41 originated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I grew up in the same town as they did, went to the same school that they did. I remember them because they used to play like in the garage. They were not that great. You know, it's just kind of like your garage kind of punk bands. You know, we had a lot of them around. And I remember seeing Fat Lip on MTV. I was at my friend's cottage in Marmora, Canada. And I'm like, holy shit, is that like Derek and them? And they're like, yeah. This shit is actually good. Like that song blew my mind, and I was like so impressed. And every chance I get, I tell people that I grew up in the same city that Sum 41 did.
Somehow I did not know that.
Well, there you go, right? It's one of those like little trivia things. Sum 41 was probably the band that introduced me to the, I guess, more hardcore side of punk, and maybe kind of helped me transition into metal.
Like with Do You Think This Is Infected, or
no, with
or does
Chuck.
This Look Infected?
Chuck is my favorite Sum 41 album. And I remember listening to songs like The Bitter End and just being like, holy shit, this is so cool. Like the metal solos, just the kind of hardcore riffs, more screaming. And that's kind of what took me into bands like Bullet for My Valentine, Atreyu, that, you know, really brought out this more metal side of me. And Sum 41 was kind of my gateway drug from like the Blink 182 style of things and Simple Plan into more metal. I remember when they did the Metallica tribute and they played Master of Puppets, I was like, holy shit, this is legit. Like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it is a really interesting sort of hybrid band because on the, like, you start with stuff like In Too Deep, where it's on, you know, regular pop stations, at least back in 2000, right? So where I lived, there was like your punk alternative station and your two like heavy rock stations, right? And it was by that second album, that's when suddenly Sum 41 was on those stations too. And it was really interesting to see someone doing both, because after All Killer No Filler, I just kind of expected them to occupy that Blink 182 space, you know? But that heavier side was like, oh, when we're in, you know, doing weight training in high school, those kids will never touch Blink 182, but they'll put Sum 41 on because that stuff gets heavier. Which
is great, man, because like This Is Liquid Infected is, I think, a lot of people's favorite album. And hearing the band just saying like how after the success of All Killer No Filler, they had to rush that album out. Like the record label was just like, we need something quick. The fact that that album is as quality as it is, but they rushed it, just kind of shows you like just how ahead of their time this band was,
especially because they were so young, because that album was 2002. I looked up their birth years the other day. They were like 22 when that came out. They were real young.
Yeah. So, and you know, I think that kind of led in the future. I know Derek had a lot of health issues, especially with like alcohol abuse. That's he's been very open about it, and I think he just released a memoir about kind of like his life in Sum 41 and everything. It's pretty cool. But hey, what we're here to talk about though is Heaven X Hell. Essentially,
is that how you say it?
That I don't know. Heaven X Hell.
Heaven colon X colon hell. Heaven times hell. Heaven by hell.
Heaven versus Hell. I was so excited when they announced this album. And kind of the theme that they were going for here, which is essentially a double album that encapsulates their entire career, and they're kind of paying homage to their pop punk upbringings, but also leaning into their more metal influences, right?
Yes.
And Sum 41 has always been open. I mean, the very first song, Fat Lip, talks about how, you know,
Maiden and Priest.
is, the idols that we looked up to. Exactly, right? Their alter ego, pain for pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Always one of my favorite bits that they would roll out. So I was excited, really, really excited. And when they released their first single, Landmines, I'll be honest, I was sold. I remember doing a reaction to that and just being like, this feels like old school Sum 41. Like, this feels like a song that fits like on the all killer, no filler, does this look infected lineup. And I really, really like that song. What do you think about that first single?
I think it is exactly how you would do a Sum 41 song today to make it blow up. I think, coming in with the electronic drums at the beginning, I think that fits very nicely in today's landscape. I think there are other tracks on the Heaven side that fit in a little bit closer with feeling to me more authentic Sum 41. But that one feels like it was really tailored to a 2024 audience. And I think they adapted really well. I wouldn't say it's my favorite thing, but I think it works out perfectly for what the point of it is.
I remember just being really, really excited listening to it, and kind of, I'll be honest, I fell off a little bit of Sum 41, like some of their older albums, or not older, I guess more like 2010 to 2020 albums. I did listen to them all, and they seem to kind of struggle here and there kind of with their identity.
Sure.
But I remember Order in Decline. Yeah. I thought was a really, really good album. Screaming Bloody Murder, for example, I wasn't a huge
Bloody
fan
Murder
of.
Might be my favorite. I really like Screaming Bloody Murder. I mean, I'm a huge all killer, no filler. I was 10 when it came out, millennial. That's a really core part of my identity. When I think of summer, that is the album I exclusively think of. But I really enjoyed how they developed and diversified their sound on Screaming Bloody Murder, because they started getting a little bit more metal, but that one is where some of the theatricality came into it.
Okay.
It's like I've always had a little bit of a difficult time feeling like Sum 41 wasn't kind of aping ideas from other bands in the punk space. Like Walking Disaster very much felt like an American Idiot thing. But
I can see that.
It was Screaming Bloody Murder that felt kind of like a little Black Parade-y, but in a much more metal way, because it was bringing in like some melodrama that you could imagine a Tim Burton music video with that album. So I really, really got into that one more than anything in between.
Yeah.
I liked Does This Look Infected? I liked Chuck, but Screaming Bloody Murder, I was like, oh, that's fresh. I'm into that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's interesting. I think I had a harder time connecting with those albums that kind of came out versus, and Chuck was such a high point for me that I think that anything that kind of came after kind of had a hard time living up to like that specific bar maybe that I had set for them.
Sure.
But even then, with this album coming out, really, really interested to kind of see how they would, I guess, develop the two sides. And I think we can kind of start there and maybe just get your overall thoughts of the album in general.
So I think that this was exactly how they should have done it. I love the idea of any sort of artistic project ending on the artist's terms, right? Not just going on and on until nobody cares anymore. I love the idea that they went, hey, you know what? We're going to be done. We've done this for a while. I mean, ever since they were like, well, I guess earlier than I thought, if you were seeing them when they were kids, because to me it was like, oh yeah, these are they started when they were 18, but I guess you were seeing them before then. So to be doing this for your entire adult life, I think it's a good idea to call it and, step away at the right time, and to have your beginning sound and your ending sound as a double record. I don't think you could have had a better concept.
How many bands do we actually see that, right? Where they say, all right, this is it. We're calling it. We're gonna end
And it's not
things.
A breakup. It's not because they hate each other.
Right. This is our album. We're saying goodbye. We're doing a farewell tour. Like, let's be honest. I think, we're going to expect sometime down the line a reunion.
Yeah, in 10 years, they'll do the next When We Were Young in 10 years.
Yeah. But kind of having them go out on their own kind of terms and releasing, and they've been very vocal about how very proud they are of this album.
Yeah, this feels like a celebration, not like a, well, sucks that it's over. It's going out on a high, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. So do you feel they succeeded?
I think the Hell album succeeds. I think the Hell disc is killer. What I struggled with the Heaven side of things is the biggest pet peeve that I've had ever since I started learning guitar in like 2004, 2005, is I noticed that a lot of songs will fall back on this one specific chord pattern. And I think you can dress it up. You can make it fancier. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a 2 or 3 chord pop song. That's totally fine. It's just that there's one very specific thing that's outside of any genre. It's everywhere. It's the minor 6, major 4, major 1, major 5. So it's the do, 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 right?
It's essentially every song I've ever written.
That song that you sent me in Spanish that you told me to put bass under.
Yeah.
I was like, that is what the chord progression is. I'm not going to play those notes. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make this feel a little bit more colorful. The reason that sticks out to me is because like there's so many songs that do it once you notice it. I remember I used to have like a list in my head of like 30 songs that I could just either on the piano or on the guitar, like sing a little bit of each of them and go through and make people go, oh, wow, they are the same. And it's kind of like the thing that Axis of Awesome did with the 4-chord song, right? But what I struggle with is when you just do those as power chords and there's not necessarily anything rhythmically interesting happening. It's just, I can just pull it up real quick so that people don't have to hear me hum it again. If it's just like... So if you start on the 4... That's how that one goes. That's the major version, right? But it's the chords in the same order. If you take the last chord and then put it at the front, then it's... That's
So the Hell song.
the blueprint. Yeah, the Hell song is the first time they did it, right? Because I went back and checked, like, did they ever do this on All Killer No Filler? And they don't. It does not appear once. The first 4 tracks on the Heaven album, all of them, their choruses are just that.
You're now done with lies. It's everything that you've got to say. I can't help but walk through your landmines. 10 feet and I'm going out of my mind. I can't wait just to see your face in all its glory. I will break. Get out, get out, get out. You never make it. I know. She's gonna bring me down.
The first 4 in a row, it's just the 4, 1, 5, 6, right? That first chord progression I played. And one of them has like some octaves going on, the second guitar on top of it. But there's really nothing giving it any color. There's nothing rhythmically interesting happening. It's just bum 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 bum. And that really knocks it down a little for me because it's not just happening across the album. It's 4 in a row, the first 4 tracks. And they all have really great, interesting guitar parts going in the verses, in the breaks, in your pre-chorus, post-chorus. They've got really cool stuff happening. But then as soon as you hit the chorus, and I guess it could just be a desire to just let the vocal shine, right? To just be like, we're just singing, that's all we're focusing on. But and I know that doesn't matter to a lot of people, but for me, that's always been a pet peeve, is just when you just sit on those 4 chords in that order. It's a little frustrating to see this album be like, this is our love letter to who we were when we started. But if you go back and then, because like after this, I went back and listened to All Killer No Filler all the way through again. And the choruses don't do this at all. They all have something much more interesting, much more unique. And I don't know if that comes just from youth and them still screwing around and not having fallen into any sort of writing rut. Well, I guess I shouldn't say them, because according to the album credits, Derek Whibley just wrote all of these songs. The only ones that anyone else from the band... No, the only one that anyone else from the band had input on was House of Liars. There are a couple tracks where there was a producer. The producer Mike Green helped out on. And then on Dopamine, they had a couple other people come in on that one. But... and then obviously they didn't write Paint It Black, right? That's a Stone song.
Yeah.
But this is all Derek Whibley stuff. And it seems like he fell a little bit into this idea of what they used to be, where it's just really basic, really simple. And I wish those choruses had a little bit more going on to them, because that's meant to be the big part of your song, right? And for the first half of the album, I feel like the choruses are the the weakest parts, because the first four are all 4, 1, 5, 6, and then when we just take 6 and put it back at the beginning, that's Future Primitive, Not Quite Myself, Bad Mistake, and Radio Silence. So 8 of the 10 tracks on disc 1 are just that chord progression, just whether you start on the 6 or whether you start on the 4.
Man, that's crazy. Like that's something I probably like. I play guitar and everything, and I will say that one of the things that I did notice was kind of how simple, you know, some of these courses were, and it was more the vocal melodies kind of shining through, and it was kind of, and you know, I didn't know that Derek wrote all of these. I would have assumed specifically Dave was just how great of a guitarist that he is.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I checked the writer credits, and it only has Dave as well as Tom on House of Liars. No writing credits for Cone anywhere.
Wow. So like, and like, you know, especially getting into the Hell side, I know there's some like killer solos in there.
Yeah, so you'd assume at least that's Dave's input, but I guess just the song structure, the chords, the vocals, was
kind
all
of
by Derek.
The overall structure. And you're right, man. Like All Killer No Filler is still such like an iconic album. And like even listening to like their main single Fat Lip, like just the structure of that overall song changes so much, right? It's unique, it's different. And I think that's what made them stand out, because you had like the Blink 182 where everyone who picked up a guitar learned every Blink 182 song right out of the gate, right? Because they were all the same.
They were so simple.
And that was Green Day. Like I remember playing What's My Age Again, and then playing Green Day's When I Come Around, and just being like, oh, these are the exact same song. Like it's just,
oh yeah,
it's you know, it's the same chord progressions. It's just one's going da dun da dun, and the other one is just kind of playing it all the way through, right?
Right. But when you talk about like When I Come Around, that's where the rhythmic aspect comes into it. I feel like you can make simple punk chords into an engaging riff and a memorable riff if you just do something interesting with the rhythm. Because if When I Come Around was just da 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 da, no one would care. But it's the strumming pattern, it's the syncopation. That's where you really lock it in. And you know, something like that would have gone a long way on these choruses. But it's when you just straight eighth notes, that's where it kills it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Green Day has, you know, what I consider one of the best bass players in punk. And like, you know, when you listen to When I Come Around, it's really not the guitar that shines, it is the bass.
Oh, yeah. That's like
really
listening to
song.
a Chili Peppers song. It's like,
the
bass is what you're humming. Yeah.
And like Sum 41, you know, I can't tell you a song where I'm like, oh yeah, like the bass here shines. You know, it's like it just kind of follows along. But you know, it's interesting that you say that like the Hell side hit with you much better than the Heaven side, and understanding the reasons why, and more from like a, you know, it kind of feels like it got a little boring because it's just the same thing over and over again. Whereas I felt the Hell side let me down more than the Heaven. I feel like Heaven really encapsulates kind of that punk sound that we haven't heard from them in a while. And they have some fun, like catchy songs. They're obviously having a lot of fun with it. And I feel like that's the part that maybe Derek struggled with the least, to kind of make that side shine. But when they got to the Hell side, it kind of fell apart for me. The songs felt a little generic. And I expected at least to be a song that like went hard. Like, because I know they could go hard. And I think the closest we got to that was like Over the Edge and maybe You Wanted War. I think Over the Edge specifically being like kind of the one that there's a little bit more kind of like screamy, kind of reverb, kind of just like kind of fast. And but overall, I was listening to it. I'm like, you know, this just kind of sounds like them trying to kind of capture that sound.
Yeah, it wasn't naturally what they wanted to write at the time. They had the idea of, oh, this is the pop record, or the punk pop record, this is the heavy record, so we have to fit into those spots.
Yeah,
no,
and kind of looking at the two sides, I kind of feel like maybe there was a missed opportunity here for what like Sum 41 really is to me. It's never that they were just like this, you know, they have a pop punk side and they have a metal side. It was always the fusion
Yes.
of pop punk and metal. The reason why The Bitter End and We're All to Blame and these songs I feel like hit is because they have those kind of punk elements, that hardcore element, but then they go heavy with like the metal influence. And here, trying to create two sides instead of maybe creating a like 12 to 14 track album where they fuse both of those sounds better together, I think is really the missed opportunity here. And why this album, unfortunately for me, doesn't reach the heights that I felt that they could. There are some great tracks in here, some that I really like Rise Up is definitely a song that I like a lot, and especially watching the music video, if you haven't seen it, like they have Noodles from Offspring in it. They have a lot of like whacking crazy elements. There's a woman on the plane giving birth to a little toy robot that takes me back to like the Hell song. There's Howie Mandel is in it. There's, you know, there's costumes and like, you know, blow up sex dolls and just like all the elements of Sum 41 that reminds me like, you know, what they were like as these like fun teenagers who didn't give a shit, right? And it had a catchy chorus, it had some screaming elements, it had a great solo from Dave, it had a, you know, breakdown. So like all of those elements came together, and I think that is one song that kind of tried to capture everything that Sum 41 is, but that was it. Everything else just kind of felt like, okay, we need to keep them separated. And that's why I feel like the Heaven side kind of gave me that closure feeling, but the Hell side lost me. And I will say Painted Black, I don't understand why they did it. There's so many covers of it.
It really just felt like the credits of a Netflix show.
Right? Like, and if you're going to do a cover, put like a unique take on it.
Absolutely.
Go maybe straight punk and just and just like go with, you know, go double time, and you know better than anyone. Like I've heard some of your covers, and
you got to change it up. You got to do something to it. The worst thing you can do is Weezer's Teal album. You cannot do that.
Thank you. And you can't. And like all I got was like Painted Black with Derek's vocals, I feel.
I mean, if this was the first cover that had ever come out ever since the Stones did it, I feel like it would feel fresh. But this is a song that, like you said, has been covered to death. So it's a weird choice to pick because they're not doing anything that hasn't already been done before by every other cover. Like while I was listening to it, I just had flashbacks to when I was living, you know, as a teenager, when my family would be like, okay, we're all watching American Idol. And every time they had a Stones week, the rock contestant would sing Painted Black. And it's just like, oh yeah, this just feels like American Idol in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like, you know, I got to it, I listened to it, and every time I listen to the album, I immediately skip it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be. I haven't allowed myself to skip, you know, leading up to this to make sure that I had a good idea of each track, but I don't think that cover has a reason to exist.
Yeah, like it almost upsets me. I'll be honest. Like it's like if you're gonna include a cover, right, which is already kind of odd for me for this album,
especially that close to the end. It's
right?
Track 18. We're nearing the finale, last thing ever, and they're like, okay, how about a Stones song?
Yeah, so I have to think that like thematically and what Derek's gone through and kind of like it vibed with him and he felt like it needed to be included in the album. It feels like a very personal thing. It feels like something maybe I would do if I was kind of doing a closing out album and I had this song that maybe just meant a lot to me or something.
Sure.
And I'm like, I just want to include it. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if he's a huge Stones fan or why this song specifically. Yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, one of my favorite bands, Electric Callboy, they did a cover of Every Time We Touch, right? Which is also a song from that has been like everyone knows it, right? Like it's just one of those songs that, you know, you listen to it and maybe at this point like you're over it, but they put a spin on it. They put like their techno dance metalcore kind of selves on it, and it is a song that even though I would say I was sick of listening to, it comes on and I can't skip it. Because it is so much fun the way they interpreted it and did it. When I see stuff like that, it just blows my mind. Like, what is Painted Black doing it here? And like, I know I'm kind of beating this the dead horse at this point.
I mean,
but
no, you're right. It is the biggest offender on the track of like, or out of all the tracks of why is this here? Yeah, and it feels like wasted space on their farewell album
for sure. So like that, that is kind of where I felt for it. But man, like overall, like if I had to give this album a score, unfortunately I would give it kind of like a 3.5 out of 5. Like if I was there,
I mean, it's the
would
classic IGN 7. There's a little bit of something for everybody.
There is. I don't think there's honestly any song in there that I would say like this stands out and it's going into just like my daily playlist, right? I think there's a lot of songs in here that I enjoyed, that I liked. I think it is a great farewell album. But if someone were to ask me like, oh, Sum 41, like my kid growing up, he says like, oh, you used to love Sum 41. All right, cool. Like what album should I listen to? Unfortunately, you would love to say like, hey, this kind of encapsulates their story. Like, here you go. And for me, this isn't. Unfortunately, it isn't. It wouldn't be the album that I would recommend to him. And you would hope that this is the album. That's what it would have been.
It's. I mean, it can't always be the greatest thing ever, especially the late night rock band's life. A lot of the time, they wind down in one way or another. I talked about this in the Blink episode we did because I was so happy that didn't happen on One More Time, that they still had that passion, that creativity in them. And the opposite, which I referenced, was the new Taking Back Sunday album, which did the same thing with the chords, those same chords, where it was just doing the same choruses. And I feel like there is a really tight 10-song album in here. And that's probably what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to make it into a playlist instead of having it as an album. And I'll just trim it down to make a mixed version, because I think filler is the main issue. And I do, like I said, I do get why they did it. I think it's a great idea, great concept. 1 disc classic, 1 disc newer stuff. But I don't think they had the material to justify it. My big gripe about the chord progressions happening over and over again, I feel like if you trim some of those out, it wouldn't be a big deal. If they pop up a couple times, whatever, it happens. And luckily, I think this album also ends really strong. I think how the end begins was great. And the choice to not have
100%.
a big drawn out ending and to just cut everything and have his voice pretty dry with no reverb or anything on it, just hit and end, and it's done. We're not dragging it on. We're not dying out. We're not burning out slowly. That's the end. Bye-bye.
I think what you're saying is on point. I think Waiting on a Twist of Fate is a fantastic start to the album. I think Rise Up is a great middle part to the album. And I think that How the End Begins is a great ending. I think they hit the beginning, middle, and end, right?
Yes.
And there is some great songs in between, but there is a lot of filler like you're mentioning. And it is unfortunately missing, when we reviewed Blink 182 One More Time, we talked about how Anthem Part 3 is like the greatest homage song to a band ever made.
It's
like
so
the
good.
way like the way it pays tribute to what came before, but progresses and moves forward, but makes you feel like an emotion towards it.
Yeah.
It made me cry. I remember listening to it like, holy shit, like I don't know how it transpired.
I've watched so many of their recent concerts, either on phone recordings or from streams, like they did Lollapalooza Chile. And when they play that song, I get worked up, man.
It hits, right? So like you would hope that there was something here on there on Sum 41. We didn't get it, but we did get some great songs. So
yeah. Just because if this is the end, and you've got Dave back, they've had him back for a while, but I feel like the big thing that needed to happen was to even just get Steve-O back on a single track, right? Because he was, I think anyone who loved Fat Lip as a kid loved Steve-O. When I turned 16 and it was like, oh, we can drive, we can go to Wendy's for lunch. I had a group there were 4 of us, and every time we did that, we would put on Fat Lip as soon as we got in the car. Like that was the theme song. That was the jam. And Steve-O's voice was everyone's favorite to try to do during the back and forth rap song bits.
Right.
The doctor should have said his mom should have had an abortion, man. Like, how do you not love that? And I had wondered for a long time, why did Steve-O leave the band? And then I finally found an interview from like 2 or 3 months ago.
I saw the same interview.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
where he's
like in Australia now, and he's like, I haven't touched the drum kit in like 10 years, but he's finally kind of getting back into it and stuff like that.
So he said that he just got burned out tour all the time and had a kid. And he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to stay and I'm going to do this for a while. He said he didn't touch the drums for 8 years until the Vandals asked if he could fill in for a couple of shows. And he actually just did another show with them last month, I think. So he's got his chops back. He's done a few, social media drum videos, like he did a Megadeth cover and stuff like that. So he's clearly playing really well. And I don't know if there is bad blood there between him and Derek or something, but it sounded like there wasn't a huge breakup, at least from what he said in this interview. He was done. It was just too much. So I feel like even if you don't have him drumming, getting his vocals in there somewhere would have made for a much stronger, more cathartic send-off. And I wish that we could have had a track with the original 4 of them on it.
Wouldn't it be great? Like, I mean, maybe we're asking too much, but like, a Fat Lip Part 2 or something like that. Like, just
Fatter
get them
lip.
back. A fatter lip. There you go. Where you get a little bit of like just them shooting the shit together. That could have been an iconic moment for this album. Don't know why
really
it didn't happen.
What Heaven needed was a goofy song.
Yeah.
The closest we
and
got was probably Johnny Libertine, I guess. But we didn't get a goofy one. We didn't get anything resembling what we were all about.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think hey, for those of you guys listening, let us know what you thought about Sum 41. As you can tell, we have mixed emotions on it. Both me and Alex are kind of on opposite sides of the spectrums as far as, what stood out to us. And I think it's really interesting the reasons why, but at the same time, this is overall a great farewell album because this is a band going out on their own terms, making the songs that they wanted to make. They succeeded, and they have a huge farewell tour going around pretty much worldwide at this point, going into next year. It's ending with a run in Canada, which I think is perfect for them. I will be seeing them in Austin because I have to say goodbye to the goats. But it's going to be a whole lot of fun. So if they're hitting your town, definitely go check them out. If you've never been to a Sum 41 show, let me tell you, it is wild. Like, people go hard. I go to metal concerts, deathcore, that kind of stuff. I feel safer at a deathcore concert than I feel at a Sum 41 concert. Yeah, so I'm putting that out there. But if you're interested in that, like, go. Like, my shirt was ripped. Like, it was a thing. It was so much fun.
Shirt was ripped. Fantastic.
Yeah, because like I was at the front and they just kept on like, yeah, it was just wild. So Alex, thank you so much for joining me and bringing like your master of musicianship to the episode. Really love hanging out with you, dude.
Yeah, man. And I'll make a little playlist, or at least a text list of my revised track listing. I'll drop that in the comments.
All right, perfect. We'll add it to the description also if you wanted to see what Alex is. And we'll be back soon. There's a bunch of albums I know that we want to check out. So we will hopefully be back very soon to talk about those.
Right on. See ya.
All right, talk to you later.